Hi, my name is Jenna, and I am at Book Expo in New York with the wonderful Chbosky. If you don't know him, he is the author of The Perks of Being a Wallflower, which is a huge book. It's actually very short, but it's a huge, phenomenon. Everybody loves that book. And he's also an incredible director and screenwriter. He's just done a lot of stuff. But today we are here talking about his new book. It's called Imaginary Friend.
Yes.
And it's very different, I feel like, than Perks.
Have you read it?
No, but I'm based on the summary that I've heard.
Based on the summary. I will say this. If you love The Perks of Being a Wallflower, you will love Imaginary Friend.
That's really good to hear.
Because it has all the heart and it has all the theme and everything else that you know and love, just done in a slightly more mischievous way.
Yeah. So what made you switch from contemporary to horror? Horror, thriller. I've heard it's kind of creepy.
Literary horror, let's call it that.
Yeah,
but yes. You know what it made me, this is why, is ever since childhood, most of the things that I loved as a kid, whether it was The Wizard of Oz or some of the Disney stuff, or it was Star Wars, it was whatever it was, always have an element of fright to them.
Yes.
And children, and going back to fairy tales. And so I thought, is there a way to write something that is as scary to a grown person as Hansel and Gretel is when you're a little kid?
Yeah.
And so taking that tradition and fairy tales, or whether it's there's things about faith or spirituality or whatever, and creating this whole soup of things as a way of talking about the same themes and same emotions that I talked about with Perks.
That's so cool. And I think I read somewhere that this was partially inspired by looking at clouds and things in the clouds.
Yes. Well, remember when you were a little kid, we all did this. You lay in the grass, you look up in the sky, and you look at the clouds, and you say, oh, that looks like a dog or a hammer or a face or whatever.
Yeah.
So my what if a little boy was walking around and realized that for the last 2 weeks it was always the same face looking at him. So there's this face, and he's outside of his school, and he's reading his book, and the shadow cuts across the page, and he looks up, and the cloud is almost as big as the sky.
Yeah.
It's that face looking at him, and he says, hello, can you hear me? There's a thunderclap.
Yeah.
He says, if you can hear me, blink your left eye, and then the cloud goes like this, and then floats away.
Oh.
So that was the moment I thought of. And
were you looking at the clouds when you did that, or was that just daydreaming?
It was actually, I found a drawing that I made when I was a kid.
Oh, that's so cool.
Of these little faces in the sky.
Creepy, but cool.
And I thought about it, and yeah, I just followed the cloud for the last 9 years, and I came up with this book, and I'm very excited about it.
Yeah, and so it has been a while, and it did take you 9 years to kind of work on it, I guess.
Well, off and on. I did direct Perks and Wonder,
and
I wrote Beauty and the Beast, and I had 2 kids, and
just a few things.
I got married. Yes, it's been a very busy decade, but yes, within that decade, whenever I wasn't doing, the life is what happens when you're busy making other plans. When I wasn't doing other plans, I was doing this. And
was this something that you set out 9 years ago and you were like, I really want to get this done soon, and it just delayed, or was it why the? You know what it was
is. I was like, if I'm going to write another book, it has to be really special. It has to be great.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to come out if people had waited 11 years, that they could wait 15, or, and I wanted to make sure that the people that love The Perks of Being a Wallflower, that they would love this as much.
Yeah.
And that it would be equal to that, and that I wouldn't let anybody down. It was actually really important to me that it be great.
Well, coming from a person who loves that book, that's really incredible to hear. Kind of going off of that, since these books are kind of similar but also kind of different in a lot of ways, did your writing process change at all, or was it kind of
it did.
the same thing?
No, it changed. See, when I wrote Perks, I was a younger person. I didn't have kids. I had a lot more time.
Yeah.
I smoked cigarettes back then. Don't do that.
Right.
Please, I beg you, don't do it. It took me forever to quit. Anyway, I had more time. I had more manic energy. I was younger, etc. So I'd write 16 hours a day. It was nothing.
Yeah.
Now, if I can get 6 in, I'm really, really lucky. So by that, plus all the delays in between, my process had to accommodate the new demands of time. But I have to say, what didn't change was that last real edit where you're like, okay, is this going to stay or is this going to go? That was the same.
Cool. Are you more of a plotter or a pantser when you write, or is it a combination?
A plotter or a what?
A pantser, writing by the seat of your pants?
I'm both.
Okay. So did you have like an arc going in of what you knew the story was going to be?
I knew some things.
Okay.
But I also, it's like my literary hero Stephen King talked about, like you kind of jump in, you don't like outline. I didn't outline a lot, but if you're surprising yourself, then you know the reader will be surprised.
Yes.
If you're tricking yourself, then you know that the reader will be taken aback by certain things that you did. So that's how I approached it.
So were you like pretty surprised at any point during this?
Very surprised. When I first started writing it, I thought it was going to be like a little short novella, you know, and then it became this really wonderfully kind of intimate epic about good and evil. And I found I had so much to write that was very personal, near and dear to me through this form. And I fell in love with it.
That's awesome.
That was very surprising to me.
Yeah, that's so cool. So another question, what's something you wish you had known before, like when you set out to write Perks? And that can be something about like the industry, yourself, writing in general. Just like what's something now that you wish you could tell yourself back then?
Two things. One is, I probably, if I had it to do over again, I would have described Charlie's crying differently.
Really?
Because I know what I meant. It's more of like the kind of things that Charlie is dealing with. He needs a lot of physical releases. And so I saw it like this. Then I realized how people were reading it, kind of like, why does he cry so much? And I'm like, oh yeah, I didn't really mean it. I know how you read it, and that's not exactly how I meant it. I would have tweaked that a little bit.
Yeah.
I probably would have made him less sexually naive, a little bit.
Yeah.
So, you know, but that's part of what's great. Like you write a book when you're younger, and you're like, let it stand. I love it. The real thing I would have done, and I wish I knew then, was if I had a time machine, I would go back to 1999 when I published that book, and I would sit myself down and I would say, listen, this book is very special, and I know that you consider yourself a movie guy because that's all you've been doing.
Yeah.
But like, don't rewrite screenplays for Hollywood.
Yeah.
Write another book. And I feel like with especially now with the publication of Imaginary Friend that I'm getting that time back.
Yeah.
It's like I lost a decade and I want to get it back.
Yeah. But also the past decade you have done so many incredible things in Hollywood, I feel like.
Oh no. What I mean is the last 10 years have been amazing. I'm talking about 20 years since Perks. The first 10.
Yes.
I should have been doing what I'm doing now.
Gotcha.
And I just didn't know. But that's what youth is for.
Yeah, of course. You always are learning new
I still
things.
love that garland, by the way.
Thank you.
It's fantastic.
Yeah. Okay. So I know I read up somewhere you went to school for film, and then you kind of like got into writing. How did you prioritize the writing and the film? What made you get into writing instead of film first?
When I was here, this is kind of, if I had an origin story moment, this is the moment.
Yes, this is the time.
I'm 12, and I want to be a novelist.
Yes.
So I go to my dad, and I say, who's the biggest reader I knew, and said, Dad, I want to be a writer. I meant novelist, I said writer.
Yes.
And he said, well, great writers are great readers, which is actually really good advice, but I didn't take it as advice at the age of 12.
Right.
I took it as like a statement of fact, and I was like, well, I didn't read a lot then. I was a boy from Pittsburgh. I played sports, and I watched HBO, and I watched like the movie Meatballs with Bill Murray like 400 times. So I took his advice this way. I said, well, I guess I read movies. All right, then I'll write movies. It was a practical thing.
Yeah.
So after that, I went to film school for screenwriting specifically.
Right.
And then I learned how to write by writing screenplays.
Interesting.
But I was always a born novelist. So when I wrote The Perks of Being a Wallflower, I never took a fiction class.
Yeah.
It wasn't that. To me, it was a 213-page monologue from this kid's point of view.
Yeah.
And it just poured out of me. And so now that I'm back in the form, now that I'm back with Imaginary Friend, it's like I feel completely reborn to do it. Because all that cinematic training and all of that, the way of telling a story with like more fragments or more impressionistic, it's all coming alive. Like there's this one part in the book, and I cannot wait till you read it.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Where, let's just say the boy follows the cloud. Okay. And you will find a part in the book where you turn the page and it will say Christopher. That's the little boy.
Yeah.
And then you turn the page, one word in the middle of the page, was not seen or heard from
so cool.
for 6 days.
Yeah.
Because just that's a very cinematic thing to do.
Yeah.
It's like all this space makes you wonder about time, and it just stops it. So I do a lot of things like that if I didn't have all this training in film, I wouldn't have done.
Yeah. So is film still something that you're passionate about, or
Absolutely, yes. I mean, there's right now I'm attached to direct the Dear Evan Hansen movie, and I just sat down with those guys last week.
Yeah.
There's other things that are really exciting.
Yeah.
Imaginary Friend doing an adaptation of that. I can't wait to do that. It's really, really fun
Yeah.
because what I love about writing novels is it's just the way that you want it, with it's you and your editor and your inner circle of friends. But when you make a movie or you make a television show, like a long form TV, it's a collaboration and you get everyone's ideas, and it's really exciting for me to do.
So kind of going off of that, obviously you like adapting screenplays and stuff like that. Have you ever considered writing like an original screenplay and like starting a whole movie from scratch?
Yeah, I thought about it, but what's really fun, I guess I need to do the book first so I can understand, it's more of as a director.
Yes.
Because if I'm going to write a movie, usually I'll direct it as well.
Right.
And so, I don't know. Again, I'm like a born novelist. And so for me to do it that way is so exciting, and I get to really know the people. And then I figure out a way to strip it down and just tell the most essential story. Kind of like I did, even though it wasn't my book, like what I did with Wonder. I co-wrote that and I directed that movie. I love that movie, and I love because I love that book. It was in service of the thing that mattered, which to me was the book.
Yeah, cool. That's so awesome. Do you have any films in particular that like have really inspired you, whether in your own craft or just like in life as a person?
Oh, absolutely. When I was 19, I saw Dead Poets Society, and
classic.
I couldn't have loved it more.
Yeah.
It's my favorite movie. My Life as a Dog by Lasse Hallström is brilliant.
Yeah.
I loved the movie Once. I loved Get Out. I loved Halloween. I loved The Shining.
Yeah, so
anything that Stanley Kubrick made practically is he is the master of adapting books. And even though you wouldn't necessarily look at his adaptations and Perks and Wonder and think it was the same techniques, but I study his techniques to actually do the same thing for a different end. There's so many. For
sure.
And I love the Marvel movies. They're a blast.
Oh yeah, Marvel. Oh my gosh,
for
I
sure.
love Marvel.
And by the way, we won't get into Game of Thrones. Go ahead.
I like that. Oh, that's a whole other thing. So I guess a good thing to end on maybe. I feel like a lot of people ask authors like advice on getting into publishing and stuff like that.
Right.
But kind of going in a different direction with the same idea. Like, what would be your advice for people who want to get into like filmmaking and into Hollywood and stuff like that?
Well, I'd say this. Everything I say to young people like yourself is age and experience and time. You're going to automatically climb the ladder.
Yeah.
That's the nature of the business. And that's like it is in life. All I say to young people is just make sure you're on the right ladder. If you can, because you're going to climb it. If you're smart, you're industrious, and like you love books and you love talking about books.
Yeah.
So you know what your passion is. You're going to follow it, and it'll lead to great things because you're on the right ladder. So just really pick the right ladder. That would be the main thing. And also, I would say this to any author, any filmmaker, if you want to write or create art, I have a 4-point plan that I share with people if you would like to hear it.
I would love to hear it. I need this 4-point plan.
Here's the 4-point plan. And it's really, it's a very cheeky title. It's something I call How to Write Your Timeless Classic or Die Trying.
Oh, perfect.
Here it is.
Yes.
Okay. Step number 1 is you write down every idea that you have. Okay? Even if it's one line, if it's like, I've always wanted to do my version of the Goonies or you name it, okay? It doesn't matter. It can be a page long, it can be a paragraph, it can be a single line.
Yeah.
So you write down all those ideas. If it's a 10-page document, 20, 30, it doesn't matter. Okay. Then you register it.
Okay.
Register the PDF for $20 with WGAEast.org. Okay? Just so you protect your ideas.
Right, yeah.
Because you can't copyright ideas. Okay. Step 3, share it with your inner circle of people that, no frenemies.
Yes.
The people that want you to succeed. Okay? And step 4 is listen to them. And this is why I advise this. Okay. As any writer, any artist, any filmmaker knows, that talent is not exactly the same thing as taste.
Right.
They're two very different, distinct things. At our best moments as artists, they're the same.
Yes.
Okay? But what this does is, so many people that I know, like how old are you? Let me ask.
I'm 24.
You're 24, okay. Do you write novels?
Yes.
There you go. How long does it take you to write a novel?
I haven't finished one in like 10 years. But
there you go, okay.
I can write pretty fast.
All right, good. So let's say, just for sake of argument, one every 2 years.
Yes.
Okay,
sure.
so you're 24. Let me do the math. You have 30 books to write. Okay?
Yeah.
And all this does is, I want you to choose the right 30 books to write, because that time is so precious.
Yeah.
And so if you sit down with your list of ideas and you're sure, you sit down and you go, I'm going to spend the next 2 years of my life writing this one.
Yeah.
And your inner circle goes, actually, and sometimes they agree, and sometimes they go, actually, I like this one. Why don't you write this one?
Yeah.
But the father character, I don't love this idea, but the father character is fantastic. Why don't you use the father character over here? Oh, and that title's really good.
Yeah.
And isn't this the same theme as this? Whenever we write our best stuff, that is happening subconsciously.
Yeah.
And by fate or by dumb luck. That's how I wrote The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and it took me years to understand that's what happens.
Yeah, that's so cool.
So think of your best idea, put all of your heart and soul into it, and always do your best foot forward, because your chances of getting published or making that movie or whatever it is are that much better. And all I want personally, as not only as an advocate for young artists like yourself, is all I really want is for the best work to happen.
Yeah.
I'm personally glad that George Orwell, his last 2 books were 1984 and Animal Farm, because if he hadn't written those 2, we wouldn't know his name.
Right, exactly.
So, and also, since you know The Perks of Being a Wallflower, I should also tell you, Imaginary Friend, it's coming out October 1st. 1 week before that, on September 24th, there's the 20th anniversary edition of The Perks of Being a Wallflower, and with a new letter from Charlie.
Oh,
20 years later.
Obviously, I'm going to have to get that, so it'll be perfect.
Yeah.
That's a perfect note to end on. So thank you so much for listening. Thanks for talking to me. This
Thank
was
you.
Amazing.
Very fun.
Again, you can get the 20th anniversary edition of Perks, and then you can also pick up Imaginary Friend in October. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll talk to you in my next video.
Thank you.
Bye.